Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bill Burns, and it's a great pleasure to welcome all of you to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. I want to first extend a warm personal welcome to three distinguished guests, Brent Scowcroft, Bill Perry, and Sam Nunn, remarkable American public servants whose personal contributions have made the world more secure from nuclear dangers and whose personal examples have inspired so many of us in this room. We're also delighted to have Governor and Mrs. Brown with us today. And of course, it is a special pleasure to welcome back to Carnegie President Nazarbayev. 7 years ago, in an historic address in Prague, President Obama outlined his vision for a world without nuclear weapons. The Prague Agenda, as it came to be known, outlined a comprehensive series of steps to translate that vision into reality. It called for the reduction of nuclear stockpiles, a global ban on nuclear testing, an end to the production of fissile materials, the strengthening of the nonproliferation regime, the resolution of nuclear disputes, and the securing of vulnerable nuclear materials. The Obama administration made significant progress in a number of these efforts, from the ratification of a strategic arms reduction treaty with Russia to the Iran nuclear deal. While these efforts generated the biggest headlines and the most controversy, significant progress has been made in other areas as well, especially on nuclear security. When he took office, President Obama saw a world in which there was too much nuclear material in too many places that were too insecure. To address this challenge, President Obama launched the Nuclear Security Summit, a biennial gathering of heads of state to focus political attention on the effort to secure as much of this material as possible, as quickly as possible. This was not some quixotic quest for humanity's better angels to prevail. It was based on a hard-nosed assessment of risk and national interest, and it was based on the example of leaders like President Nazarbayev, leaders who understood that nuclear material and weapons would make them less secure and less prosperous. Nearly 25 years ago, as the Soviet Union disappeared, Kazakhstan, under the leadership of President Nazarbayev, made the courageous choice to relinquish the nuclear arsenal on its territory, at the time the fourth largest arsenal in the world. Kazakhstan joined the Non-Proliferation Treaty as a non-nuclear weapons state and disposed of more than 100 weapons worth of nuclear material. Since then, Kazakhstan has continued to do its part to reduce nuclear dangers, joining its neighbors in establishing a nuclear weapons-free zone in Central Asia, housing the global uranium fuel bank, hosting an early round of the Iran talks, and joining with Japan to lead international efforts to bring the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty into force. All of this took place at a time of enormous transformation in Central Asia, deep insecurity to its south, the rise of China to its east, and the resurgence of Russia to its north and west. President Nazarbayev has looked to position Kazakhstan as a bridge across these geopolitical fault lines, and as a result became a trusted political partner, including to the United States. We are very fortunate to have the opportunity to hear directly from President Nazarbayev about his assessment of the changing nuclear landscape and his views on how we can sustain and hopefully accelerate our climb toward the mountaintop that President Obama and our honored guests have challenged us to reach together. And so I hope you'll all join me in offering a very warm welcome to President Nazarbayev.
Dear participants in the meeting, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Mr. Burns and his colleagues for their hospitality and giving me an opportunity to speak here. I'm glad to see my old friends that Mr. Burns introduced, who have worked for anti-nuclear movement and Kazakhstan's giving up of nuclear arms. It's a great honor for me to visit the Carnegie International Peace Endowment. more than a century, the Institute has been making a significant contribution to the world in international affairs. Today, I would like to share with respected audience my vision of the problems of the modern world order, the role of Kazakhstan at the international arena, and the possibility of the development of nuclear-free world. 25 years at the border of the 21st century was where historic changes took place in front of our eyes. The world has changed in front of our eyes, and the political map gotten new independent states on the territory of the former Soviet Union. In December of 2016, this year, we will be celebrating 25th anniversary of our independence. I'd like to remind that in 1991, very few people considered Kazakhstan a viable independent state. Many could not even find our state on the map. After the disintegration of the Soviet Union, we suffered a systemic crisis, not a sustainable economy, and an ineffective system of state government. The level of life was very low. 40% of the population went up below the poverty line. The inflation was over 2,000%. We had to create a new state, all anew, create transition from planned administrative system to a market economy, from totalitarianism to democracy. In very compressed time, we have done tremendous work in reinforcing the state, keeping market economy and modernization of the society. We managed to quickly and successfully, more quickly and successfully than other countries, to conduct large-scale reforms, reorganize state property, and attract significant foreign investments. Over those years, domestic GDP growth 21-fold and per capita 17-fold, from $600 per capita in 1994 to $13,000 in 2014. So we have become average income country. I have to say that the life expectancy in Kazakhstan have never been as high as now. Because of the rich natural resources, Kazakhstan has created a strong domestic economy and created special national fund when the international market was good. This national fund allows us to develop the industry and get over crises. More than 28 new sectors of economy has been created. Over 400 more than 400 new types of product and multiple thousands of new jobs were created. Finance crisis in Asia in the end of the 80s and the world crisis in the end of 2010 has played a role. Today's global crisis, geopolitical rivalry, and mutual sanctions have negative impact in our region and create new goals, new tasks ahead of us. Kazakhstan system was actively developed, and I should like to mention that in its history, Kazakhstan has never had experience of liberal policies and market economy. We have created that from zero. The honest and transparent election that took place on March 20th, multi-party election to our parliament, showed the adherence of the country to the constitutional reforms, development of a democratic law-based state, and that has strong public institutions. 3 political parties representing country's entire social range made it to the parliament. The results of the elections will contribute to the implementation of the ambitious goals and tasks that we set. Among thousands of observers from the international community, recognize those elections as open and transparent. This allows us to complete 5 steps to the domestic reform that we have to complete. This is creating of professional state apparatus, modernization of the law, of the court system, industrialization, diversification of the economy, and open, a transparent state. The realization of the plan looks at the creating more balanced political system, develop civil society institutions, and knowledge-based economy. All of this allow our country to join 30 most developed countries in the world. This is our strategic task in the program 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, 25 years ago, I have signed the decree of closing the Semipalatinsk nuclear test range, one of the largest in the world. Over 40 years of testing at this range, which was open and secret from the local population, 456 explosions took place, including 120 atmospheric ones. Their summary yield could have destroyed 2,500 times Hiroshima. The radiation impacted over 300,000 square kilometers. This is equal to the territory of one of the largest European countries, for example, Italy. Testing, as I mentioned, was done in the secret from the people, and a population of 3 regions went up under threat of radiation. As their consequences, more than 1.5 million citizens of Kazakhstan suffered, and we were left alone with this problem. Closing of the Semipalatinsk range was a historic act of Kazakhstan independence, power, and wisdom, and was one of my first decrees as a president of an independent country. Exactly after that, the act of shutting down the range did the Nevada and in China ranges got shut down. Not only we rid the world of one of the most significant threats, we voluntarily gave up on the most significant missile potential that was on our territory. This is 110 ballistic missiles with MIRV warheads, over 1,200 nuclear warheads that could reach any point on the globe. And the vehicles for those bombs were also located in our territory. We elevated above the nuclear threat and made a principled choice in favor of a nuclear-free future for our country and the whole world. Kazakhstan, one of the first in the NIS, joined the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It is symbolic that in 2006, specifically Semipalatinsk was the place where the Central Asian Nuclear Free Zone Agreement was signed. Exactly here in 2008, the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization conducted a unique experiment, turning the last century epicenter of nuclear testing into the epicenter of peace. I am deeply convinced, strongly convinced, that building of the nuclear-free world should become mankind's main goal. On December 7th, UN General Assembly, based on Kazakhstan's initiative, adopted a universal declaration of world free of nuclear weapons. Our country consistently contributes to the strengthening of the non-proliferation regime. By creating a nuclear-free zone in Central Asia, we're calling on creating a stable geography of the world, sustainable world geography. This would be broadening of the 6 nuclear-free zones in Eurasia, Latin America, and Africa. An important step was signing in August of 2015 an agreement with IAEA locating a low-enriched uranium bank in Kazakhstan. This is a global-scale event. The world should judge it as the most important measure that Kazakhstan took to assure a safe and peaceful use of atomic energy. We always supported the process of international negotiations on Iranian nuclear program and made practical contributions to it. The results of 2 rounds of negotiations that took place in Almaty in 2013 were used as overall keystone foundation for the Joint Comprehensive Action Plan for Uranium Nuclear Program. We have gave practical assistance to the implementation of joint plan to the Group of 6. On the 27th of December of the last year, coordinating with IAEA Group of Six in Iran and appropriate organizations of the United Nations Security Council. Kazakhstan supplied Iran with 60 tons of natural uranium as a compensation for taking the low-enriched uranium out of that country. We are convinced that this will reinforce the non-proliferation regime, implementation of the lawful rights of the states to develop peaceful nuclear programs, and non-discriminatory access to nuclear fuel. Time has come to make fundamental decisions banning deployment of the death-bearing weaponry in space, in neutral waters, and in Arctic of the world ocean. International agreements and UN register for banning the use of scientific discoveries for the creation of the new types of weapons of mass destruction should be developed. An important task that we see is the creation of the global anti-nuclear movement. This is what the project initiated by Kazakhstan, the International Atom Project, gaining wider and wider international support. That's what it's targeted at. As a co-chairman of the 9th Conference on Implementation of the Universal Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, Kazakhstan will continue efforts for its universal acceptance and full support. Dear colleagues, in the whole history of human civilization has lived through 15,000 wars, approximately 3 wars for every year. According to Harvard University data, the most bloodshed in the human history was the 20th century. As a result of 2 world wars, more than 1,500 conflicts, 170 million people perished. Nevertheless, the leaders of the leading powers at the end of the century, if you remember, has agreed about the end of the Cold War. After the 21st century, the mankind was laying its hope as a new era of peace and global cooperation. Unfortunately, the unique historical chance for building a safer and stable world order was missed. The world once again is under threat of a danger that we should not underestimate. This is a threat of a destructive war of a global scale. The geography of the modern conflicts has covered the theaters of world wars of last century in the east of Europe, Near East, and the North Africa. The 1968 agreement on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons is not being living up to its intent. The unprecedented crisis of trust between global players is leading to degradation of the guarantees of non-use of nuclear arms. One of the most serious issues of 21st century is the threat of nuclear terrorism and illegal circulation of nuclear and radioactive materials. The world is sliding into a new nuclear age, potentially more dangerous and unpredictable. More than 60 years ago, outstanding scientists Einstein and Russell have spoke with a manifest in which they postulated the main key: will the mankind will be destroyed, or will the mankind give up on war? And after, you remember, 4 wise men on behalf of the active political systems proposed an identical solution. Eliminating wars is the keystone task for the world, but there is no alternative to it. I'm convinced that a political will of all world leaders is required for that. And Kazakhstan has a moral right to make those declarations for what I mentioned before: closing down the range and giving up on nuclear arms. To overtake those challenges, deep changes are needed in the world paradigm and uniting of the efforts of all the states. Kazakhstan is making its contribution to resolving this task. During the session of United Nations General Assembly, I've proposed the Global Initiative 2045, which is proposed to be implemented by the 100th anniversary of the United Nations. The goal of the task is to create a new trend of the world development based on the equal access of all countries to the world infrastructure, resources, and markets. Worldkind has truly life need for the overwhelming program for the 21st century without war. I'll repeat, the paradigm of sustainable development has to include new world order with consideration for the current and future threats to security. The main mechanism for regulating all the disputes among the states should be peaceful dialogue and constructive negotiations based on the equal responsibility for peace, security, and non-interference in internal affairs basis. The keystone of the modern world order is the country's adherence to the legal framework. That's why Kazakhstan proposed to create a world conference of the United Nations on the highest level that is called to restore world trust and now, third, the Middle East. The conflict in Syria has consequences beyond the boundaries of the region. The separated efforts of the countries involved only plays in the hand of Daesh. That's why I proposed to create, under the auspices of the United Nations, a single network of defending against world terrorism where all the countries could participate. This way we could track every terrorist, their accounts, movement, their friends and relatives, which country, which state are those terrorist threats coming from. I don't think we can do anything other than that. Otherwise, we would not be able to overcome this evil. Practically, we have a war going, but by different means. On the one hand, on the other hand, we should not confuse terrorism with Islam and other peaceful religions. Murder and terrorism is not a religious category. Based on the Kazakhstan's initiative in May of 2006, during the UN General Assembly, there will be a high-level dialogue on the subject of religion and peace. In 2003, in 2006, we conducted the World Religious Leader Congress in Astana with participation of the representative world religions. Over several years, they became an important platform for the constructive dialogue on the interfaith dialogue issues. Fourth, crisis in Ukraine has bared deep divisions on the security in Europe. We have participated in resolving the crisis and continuing to work. We assisted with the Minsk meetings to the organizations of Belarus, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Ukraine, as well as the negotiations of the Normandy Four. We continue those efforts for the purpose of the full normalization of the situation in the east of Ukraine. Fifth, I'm convinced that the reason for the global crisis is the continuing deep defects of the world economy and finances. They generate social and political instability around the world, reinforcing the threat of chaos and anarchy. 4 years ago, we have proposed an initiative, the G Global, which is destined at uniting all the countries' efforts to overcome the crisis. Not just 8 to 20 states. We should get the opinion of all the states that have not participated in this matter in order to jointly resolve the issues that concern economic stability in the world. Within the framework of the G Global, the platform of the Astana Economic Forum, a World Anti-Crisis Plan was developed, which received wide-range support. 6. Kazakhstan proposed itself for the post of non-permanent member of the Security Council for the period of 2017-2018. We hope to receive support for our candidacy. Ladies and gentlemen, the global crisis gives the mankind a unique chance for creating a keystone basis for effective and balanced world economic development model. One of the key trends of the 21st century that we see is building open Eurasia. Eurasian region is a key geopolitical and economic factor in the world policy. This is where interests of all global players intercept, from China and Russia to the United States to European Union to India, Iran, and Turkey. Very Very important is to direct regional processes into constructive channels, lowering the conflict potential in the region by deepening of the integration and cooperation region. Exactly why I propose creating of a joint Eurasian economic space. Building of the world's stable and prosperous Eurasia would be of advantage to everybody. Not only will lower the conflict potential in the world, but it will also give multiplicational effect in the growth of the global economic growth. You know that starting last year, a Eurasian Economic Union started functioning. A lot has been said about that. It's an economic unification with single rules of goods and services movement, capitals and resources across the borders. We removed all the customs borders. I have to stress that this is strictly economic union. We're not trying to recreate former USSR in any form or shape. We should get over those stereotypes of the Cold War. They interfere with us seeing the future. Eurasian Economic Union, I have to stress once again, is strictly an economic organization. All countries have equal rights. They all participate in the governing, and the decisions are made on the basis of consensus. The equal representation through the work organs is assured. The chairmanship of the union this year is a representative for Armenia. The representative in other governing organs are represented. Kazakhstan will be chairing in the next year. The movement of the Eurasian European Union and the Chinese search for the Great Silk Route, if it would join to a European Union, that would be a powerful unification of all the countries. The key meaning in this process are countries of Asia. I'm convinced that our region would have to be integrated and open to the world through the transportation and trade routes in all directions. For this, Kazakhstan Infrastructural Development Program Route to the Future is being developed. We now have rail and auto transport routes. We hope to conduct Expo 2017 in our capital. All of this completely correlates to the United States initiative for development of the cooperation in Central Asia, 5+1. We understand that quality economic development is hard to achieve without full integration into the world economy. In 2015, Kazakhstan has become fully fledged member of the World Trade Organization. We're looking at this as a capability for us to broaden international investitions and transportation, primarily, first of all, with countries of the Western world. Dear friends, this world is the 25th anniversary of the establishment of Kazakhstan and United States diplomatic relations. The United States became one of the first states that recognized our country's independence. We're grateful for consistency, firm support of our independence. We have become a strategic partners. Appropriate agreements have been signed. Tens of American companies are working in Kazakhstan, and the volume of investments that came from the U.S. companies is reaching $30 billion. We're continuing this work. Multiple relations have reached high level based on trust and mutual respect. Security, non-proliferation, those are time-tested platforms for our cooperation. We completely supported White House's initiative for the Nuclear Security Summit, which became a tremendous step towards international security. Tomorrow we'll participate in this forum for nuclear-free world. I think that this forum will become one more step towards nuclear-free world. Kazakhstan is a reliable partner of the United States in implementation of the task on reducing nuclear threat in the world. Think about the future. I, as a politician with a long experience who have seen a lot, often remember historical date 24th April 1995, the day when the last nuclear charge of the ones that we inherited from the former USSR was transported from the territory of Kazakhstan. 200 years ago, U.S. President Abraham Lincoln said, "You cannot avoid responsibility tomorrow by trying to avoid it today." Being led by the hope and inspirations of my people that were tortured by tens of years of nuclear testing, I do truly believe in the world free of nuclear arms. Several generations of citizens of Kazakhstan have been suffering from radiation ailments that were incurred as a result. For us, this is not a rhetorical issue. Exactly the people have stated the question of getting rid of that. Our people personally experienced all the threat and the death of nuclear weapons, truly understands the catastrophic consequences of its use. Therefore, we tirelessly will continue efforts in nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, which is built on firm imperative. World has and can become safer and more stable. That is a task for our generation, to give our children and grandchildren a safe world. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. President, it is always a pleasure to see you, and I want to thank you for a very thoughtful set of remarks, characteristically, and also for your leadership on nuclear issues over the last quarter century. In addition to your nuclear leadership, one of the accomplishments that you've managed to achieve is building strong relations with complicated major powers, with Russia, with China, with the United States. If I could just start the brief period we have for questions by asking, what more do you think could be done to improve cooperation amongst China, the United States, and Russia on securing nuclear materials, on dealing with the problem of nuclear terrorism that you underscored, given the recent tensions, especially between the United States and Russia? What are the kinds of things that you would recommend doing?
Should I step over there? I spoke in detail about this issue. It's a very appropriate, a good question. Resolve the issue of non-nuclear world is impossible without two main nuclear powers, United States and Russia. And this is exactly the way it is. And the fact that the trust among those countries and among nuclear states overall has decreased, that is a very dangerous tendency. I think this has to be overcome. We know sources of those disagreements. I do not want to defend or to really cover it for anybody, but we really have to get out of the situation. Ukrainian issue has to be resolved. I think it is possible to resolve it. Both parties have to show will. The issue that is remaining is that Ukrainian country says that we'll conduct elections, let Russia leave. Russia says first adopt the law on the Donbas and Lugansk status. That law has to be passed. So it's possible to reach an agreement. I have to find a consensus. The fact that Mr. Kerry was in Moscow, conducted his negotiations, I think they're reaching consensus in Syria because that is a threat for everybody. And based on that, and based on fulfilling nuclear disarmament obligations, we can reach consensus and start mutual work. There is no other alternative. There is just no alternative. If we step away from the route, there is no Cold War. Now those decisions are not being complied. If it comes to that, then the future is unpredictable. I'm convinced that common sense will win in any case.
Thanks, Mr. President. I think we just have time for 2 or 3 questions from our audience. So all I'd ask is if you have a question, please raise your hand, wait for the microphone to come to you, and then please identify yourself and remember to end with a question mark. Yes, sir.
Mr. President, I'm Dan Poneman. Had the honor to participate in the 20th anniversary celebrations in Semipalatinsk, and I saw the thousands of people who shared your vision and appreciate your leadership. You gave up the nuclear weapons, you closed the test site, and you have a vision of the economic future that includes now uranium, for which Kazakhstan has become the world's leading producer. What is your vision, sir, of Kazakhstan's future in the nuclear industry and how to take advantage of your nonproliferation leadership, but also the technological leadership you've developed in nuclear, and now with things like the Fuel Bank, you have a platform. I'm wondering how you see this developing in the future.
First of all, Kazakhstan has largest deposits of uranium ore. We're second in the world. Kazakhstan is the first place in the world in terms of uranium sales for nuclear power stations in the world. And we will continue as leaders. That's first of all. Second, we want to have full nuclear cycle. Right now, we're excavating, enriching, but Russia has full enrichment, and then we make fuel elements. We would like to develop a full cycle. We have agreed with Russia. Kazakhstan has became a shareholder in the plant that produces that and would like to supply the world not just the ore, but also nuclear fuel. I think in that sense, our work will continue, especially since there is trust in Kazakhstan. All our installations are under IAEA control. We're completely transparent and open. The fact that we can do it, the world knows about that. Therefore, former nuclear testing range in Semipalatinsk we left as a scientific, as it is. The scientific research work that is being done there on the nuclear power station security is what's taking place, and capability of withstanding high temperature environment under nuclear stress. I think will make our contribution in that sense in the nuclear free world and the peaceful use of nuclear energy.
We
talked about low enriched uranium bank in Kazakhstan. It's a global, unique process. Somehow it was not noticed in the world. It gives tremendous preferences. This way, every country does not have to enrich or proliferate. Look at the Belgium terrorism. There was information that terrorists wanted to actually conduct a terrorist act at a nuclear power station. They're trying to get enriched, low enriched uranium for that. In that sense, it is very important for us to create a nuclear fuel bank. Every country that would like to use it for peaceful purposes would be able to withdraw from the bank without having to have its own enrichment capacities.
Please.
Yes, I'm Paul Stronsky from the Carnegie Endowment. And as you mentioned in your speech, your government last year announced some very bold proposals for political and economic modernization. The 100 steps is what I'm talking about. However, some critics of your government note that these previous reform initiatives have faltered, and they also criticize Kazakhstan for not living up to some of its commitments to the UN and OSCE on democracy and human rights. So I'm wondering how what's your response to these criticisms and to skepticism about Kazakhstan's commitment to these issues? Thank you.
You did not say which previous programs were you speaking of. Usually Kazakhstan completes all its programs that it promises to the people, and we never gave promises that we could not fulfill. If you look, I mentioned that I've been working in my job for a long time. I have been accused of all kinds of sins, sometimes that I'm autocratic or a dictator. I always say, if every 5 years my people in alternative elections votes for me, and not once this election was below 80%, what are we talking about? Exactly the same way last year there were appropriate elections. We invited observers from 100 countries of the world. They were at every polling place and was surprised that people were standing in line starting early in the morning to vote. 2-hour-long lines. More than 77% of the voters turned out, and 82% among them gave votes to the party that I had. Therefore, this is one answer. Second answer, Kazakhstan is a multi-ethnic state, 130 different nations and people. And we have 17 various religions that are being practiced. Everybody practices their religions in their own places of worship, and they have right. They are not interfered with. All 130 people and nationalities live in the same equal conditions. Nobody is taking away those rights from them. They have a right to study their history, their culture, to communicate. For example, in the Assembly of the People of Kazakhstan, they have votes and can elect their own delegates to the higher chamber. So we assured freedom of the word. The elections took place, European observers, all kinds of observers, they all pointed out that there were no violations of the laws, that it was without violations. That's my answer to your question. I saw President Obama's visit to Cuba when Mr. Obama said in his speech about the freedom of people that the country that assures free health care and free education, we cannot say that they do not assure human rights. I wouldn't say that, although we have the same, but as far as 5 initial projects, I said that economically we reached certain successes. I think they're pretty good over those years. Middle class in Kazakhstan is growing. Not a single person in Kazakhstan has emigrated somewhere to find work. Kazakhstan people are going to some of the best resorts of the world. I am very proud of that because people of Kazakhstan have never had that good of a life before. For 150 years, we were under Tsarist Russia, 70-some years under the Soviet Union, and only once we received our independence, we can direct the riches of the country for the good of our people. We think there is now a new stage of our reforms. What is the 5th reform? First, it's transparent, open, democratic government service system where people are accepted based on competition, no matter what their nationality or religion. They're only on their own merit. Second, the rule of law. I will not hide that as an inheritance from the Soviet Union, our court system was the most lagging in politics as well. That's why we're conducting quarterly reform of the court system to make sure that it is fair and uncorrupt. We're doing a lot, and if you read the 100 Steps, what was specifically done in that area? Third, economic development, complete diversification of the economy in order not to depend upon the gas and oil prices. Kazakhstan is extremely rich in gas, oil, and resources country. We're in the first among first 10 gas and oil producers in the world, both black and non-black metals, but all of that are the raw materials. We, under the Soviet Union, were a raw material state. Now that we're saved in the good years over $100 million in the National Beneficiary Fund, we're stating that to industrialization. We built over 900 plants over 5 years. Now we're building investment facilities. We're inviting investors. We're creating special preferences for them. We're providing them with free land, communications. We give them corporate and income tax holidays, create all conditions, and we're inviting them to work in our country. Second, we're conducting tremendous infrastructural programs, such, for example, as President Roosevelt did during the Great Depression, building railroads, truck routes, airports, ports. All of that creates jobs, and at the same time, it develops us. Third, so economy was third. Fourth, multi-ethnic state identification, assurance of unity to where everybody becomes a citizen and feels as a citizen of Kazakhstan. We'll unite them and continue our work. And fifth is exactly further democratization of the society through open government, transparent, open information, open critic of the government, and complete responsibility on all levels. To get this done, we had to change laws. On January 1st of this year, we adopted 60 new laws, and started January 1st, we started implementing this program. So it's too early to critique it. Let's see how it develops, but I'm convinced that we'll fulfill all the steps of the program from 1 to 100, and then we can talk.
Thanks, Mr. President. I think we have time for just one more question. So let me go way in the back. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Здравствуйте, Нурсултан Абишевич. Я Зульфия Урымбаева, профессор университета Дрекси в Филадельфии.
The role of economy in the world relations on the way to the non-nuclear and civilized world is very important. I'd like to ask you, using this opportunity, vision of Kazakhstan, a personal view of the role of science and education, the way to non-nuclear civilized world. In your opinion, what is the key task? What is the main priority? What has to be done to make sure that countries better understand how to move in that direction? The depth of today's global crisis, we know, is growing new economy based on science, on scientific achievements. We expect incredible discoveries in the area of technology, medicine, genetics, development in the 21st century or further. No country would be able to do that without science and educated people. That's why Kazakhstan, despite difficulties, starting in 1993, has directed to all the countries of the world up to 5,000 young people at our own expense. We have educated them. We returned tens of thousands back, but more than 20,000 was sent by their own parents. So we created an intellectual reserve of the most talented kids. To make sure that they could study in Kazakhstan, we created an international level university in Kazakhstan where there are instructors from all the countries in the world. The competition to join, there are 5 people that get accepted out of 10,000 applicants. So education is the most important thing. We assure that the person that is middle school, high school graduate, their first job is actually assured by the state. Then he can go and study on his own. But to move the science, we develop special centers which can be attached to the universities. Astana University, Information Technology University in Almaty, are exactly innovation development centers. When we talked about the crises in the future, we considered that for Kazakhstan, a great of course, advantages that we have resources. We're not complaining. We'll use them in the future. But second, our advantage is the agrarian complex. Kazakhstan has 2.7 million square kilometers territory. It's the second largest after Russia territory in the former Soviet Union. And we have 220 million hectares of useful lands. Only 30 is being used right now, only 30 million, and we're planning to grow food on those lands. That would be a great business. We got China and India and Siberia and Russia that are close by as consumers. That's why I would like to invite portfolio investors to develop agricultural complex, especially in manufacturing sector. There is great interest on the part of American and European companies. We'll develop that. Soviet science was multi-stage. By the time we got money, it took a long time. We shortened that period now. Any person that proposes innovations after getting an approval of special commissioner will immediately get financing. Through that, a number of scientists over the last 3 years have multiplied fourfold. A number of scientists overall is growing in our country as well. This is not exactly the level that we really want to, but we will work because we see where the world is moving and we know what we should be doing, and we will be doing that.
Mr. President, thank you so much again. It really has been an honor to have you at Carnegie this afternoon. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll join me in expressing our appreciation to President Nazarbayev.
Thank you very much for devoting your attention to my remarks.